Hey lambs, I'm back. Welcome to your True Crime Tuesday. In this episode, we're going to be talking about police going for a welfare check and finding something that they were not expecting. Before we begin, if you are new here, my name is Kai, and this is Love and Murder, Heartbreak to Homicide, the Tuesday edition. Also, I want to remind you that this episode and all my episodes are sponsored by my lambs in Patreon, patreon.com/Love and Murder. If you want to be a sponsor of Love and Murder and get extras, just subscribe to the Patreon at patreon.com/Love and Murder. We have different tiers for your listening pleasure. Now let's get into this True Crime Tuesday. On Wednesday, April 6, 2022, in Irvine, California, the Irvine Police Department performed a welfare check at 10:30 a.m. at a house on 58 Riverboat Lane. They were called to do a welfare check after the parents, the mother and the father, and their adult son had not been heard from in over a year. So when they got to the house, they found something they were not prepared for. Quote, 3 severely decomposing bodies. So they were like, so is this a murder? Is this a murder-suicide? Like, you can't say all 3 just sat there and keeled over of a heart attack at the same time. So what in the world is going on here? During the investigations, officials came to the conclusion that the bodies had been there for about 12 to 16 months. Can you imagine the smell and the decomposition? Ugh. They also came to a conclusion that there were, quote, some indications this was a domestic-related incident. So they started researching it as if it was a murder-suicide. The other problem is that the bodies were so decomposed that it was getting really hard to figure out who's who, what's what, where's where. They couldn't identify the bodies. Based on what was told to them, the people who were living in the house was the father, who was in his late 60s, the mother, who was in her 50s, and the son, who was in his 30s. And another reason why it looked more like a murder-suicide is because when they were in the house going through everything, trying to figure out what happened, they did notice that there were no signs of forced entry. So the door was still locked, windows were locked, nothing was open, no windows were broken, nothing. And they did find a gun inside the residence. But my question is, if it was a murder-suicide, was the gun found in somebody's hand or even next to one of the bodies, something like that? Then the other thing they're trying to figure out, which is what I'm trying to figure out, is they're trying to figure out how these deaths went unnoticed for so long. So 12 to 16 months. But also the smell, people who lived around them, you would have smelled. Have you ever left meat out? Have you ever left meat out to spoil? You would have smelled that smell. And if you've left meat out to spoil, I accidentally put meat into a storage container of mine. And I remember I would come back and it would the smell was getting worse. And I was like, what is that? And then it got to the point where it's like, even before you got to the storage container, oh my God, the stench. So I started ripping apart my storage container, trying to figure out what it was. And I was just letting my nose guide me. And then I found, and I had accidentally packed this little cooler that had raw chicken in it. So it was supposed to be a cooler that went into my car that came with me, but instead it's a cooler that went into a box accidentally that went into my storage unit. And it had sat there and spoiled. Yeah. So if I could smell that little tiny bit of chicken from how many feet away, imagine 3 decomposing bodies for a year. So why was nobody reporting the stench that was coming out of that house? And then why were no family members calling to report like, hey, I haven't heard from my brother or my sister or my nephew in like a year? I mean, it could be that they just kept to themselves. They didn't really talk to their family like that, but nobody had jobs. Nobody went to the store, the mailbox, nothing. They were just that forgettable. That's pretty sad. So in trying to figure this out, investigators spoke with the Homeowners Association, who did say that the HMO is, quote, responsible for at least some of the lawn care and maintenance for the front of the homes. So looking at the home at a glance, it wasn't immediately apparent that someone hasn't been in and out of the home for maybe up to a year. So this is from the HOA. So they were mowing the lawn and keeping it up to keep, I mean, if they don't have a newspaper subscription, but mail, like your mailbox, unless it goes directly into their door. You know how some people have mail slots that goes directly into their door, so it'll just been building up at the front door. But if you have a mailbox, then that's going to be filling up. So I guess in terms of visual aspect, there are ways around that. But I mean, they came and mowed the lawn. They couldn't smell anything. Did they have the house packed in such a way that smells weren't leaving the house? Like, it's so much things that you got to think about. Later on in April, the Orange County coroner was able to identify 2 of the 3 people using DNA to make a positive ID. Karina Poirier, 55, and I hope I said that right, Poirier. So that was the mother. She was 55 years old, and Serge Poirier, 63 years old. So that was the father. So that just leaves the third person, which by process of elimination has to be the 30-year-old, right? So instead of the third person being 30, through investigation, not through identification, they deduced that the third person was a 21-year-old named Morgan Poirier. During the autopsy and trying to get the DNA matches, they realized that all 3 people did sustain a gunshot wound. They also answered one of the pieces of the puzzle, which is the question of why nobody called for a welfare check before this time. And that's because the family, the extended family, was in Canada. So I guess maybe there was no way for them to even check on their family members. And maybe after a year of nobody answering phone calls, emails, text messages. I mean, but a year though? But either way, it was the Canadian authorities that contacted the California authorities, because the family, the extended family of the Poiriers, I really hope I'm saying their name right, are the ones who contacted Canadian authorities to say, hey, I haven't heard from my family in the U.S. Can we find out what's going on? Can we send the U.S. authorities over for a welfare check? So it went through that channel, and who knows how long that took. So that kind of answered the question as to why nobody else was reporting them missing. But that doesn't answer the question as to why people at work, people at school, well, he's 21, so I mean, he's out of high school. He might not have been in college, but still the smell. Why was nobody complaining about the smell or reporting the smell? You could chalk that up to trash, I guess, but trash, the same trash for a year. So it was just logged as a murder-suicide. No further questions were answered. No further investigation was done. I did search for why would these people do that? Who did it? It's not saying if it was the father who did it to his family or the mother who did it to her family or even the son who did it to his family. They're not saying. That's where it ends. So I kind of wanted to bring that to you because I just thought that was weird how a family had been sitting there dead for almost a year and a half with nobody reporting them, just nobody. Like, you have no friends. I could understand your family was in Canada, but nobody. And then I did find some comments on this that I wanted to read to y'all. And it kind of goes hand in hand with what I was saying. So for instance, somebody said, imagine not seeing your neighbor's car moving for 18 months and not thinking anything unusual. That's what I'm saying. You're literally not paying attention. And this is a gated community. So it's not like, it's a large community. It's a gated community of people who probably know each other. Like, your neighbors are constantly your neighbors. You should see the size of this house. It's a huge house in Irvine, California. They even have like a huge pool. It's at the end of a cul-de-sac. Like, you just sat there and watched the cars not move, or you just didn't care. Somebody else said, there was a shy international kid in my high school who suffered severe asthma attacks in his apartment and passed away. He lived by himself. His parents lived overseas, so no one was there to help him. Apparently, he tried to make it to the kitchen to grab his inhaler, but he was too late. He didn't show up to school for a week, so the school and his parents called. No one answered. When they sent the police over, they realized he'd already been dead for several days. No one knew about his health condition because he didn't have friends. To this day, a decade later, I still think about that kid and his family. Again, but it was only a week. It was literally a week. This is 16 months max. That's completely different. Somebody else said, one of the tenants at my small apartment complex died on the side of his bed and wasn't found until a month later. I complained to management that something was wrong weeks before. He would usually leave a bag or two of garbage out his front door, and I would throw it away from him because he had some health issues and had a hard time walking to the dumpster. I felt something was wrong when a week passed and didn't see any garbage left outside his front door. I told management about it a few times, that they should check on him to make sure he was okay, but no one listened until I smelled something and saw flies swarming the bedroom window and door. I also noticed a little cobweb at the bottom of the corner of his door, and I knew that no one had been in or out of his apartment, so I knocked on the manager's door again. We called the local fire department and do a welfare check. Sure enough, he had been decomposing on his bed for about a month. That's what I'm saying. See, even he smelled something. That's what I'm saying. And in looking at the specs for these houses, the neighbor was literally, there's a small walkway between the two houses. So the neighbor had to have smelled something. There's no way. How did you go 16 months in a nice gated community? I mean, I know I've heard stories of HOAs and the complaints they get, little bitty complaints. Oh, he has up a flag of, I don't know, a guy's face on it. Oh, I don't like to see that. Or their trees are 16 inches too high or 1 inch above the land or whatever. So you're not going to complain about a horrible smell? And it's not like anybody came out and said they were complaining to the homeowners association. So I don't know how they went 16 months. Somebody else in the comments said, I live in a gated, guarded community. 1 out of 8 homes is owned by people who live overseas and are rarely at the house. Many appear to be vacant. I can see how this could occur. Okay. I don't live in a gated community. I don't have money like that. So, I mean, I guess maybe they were not there. I guess. Somebody else said, times have changed. We need more communication with neighbors, even if it's small talk. It's a shame. One other person said, this reminds me of the case where it took 3 years to discover a woman who had been dead in her apartment for 3 years. For 3 years! Her disappearance didn't ring any bells because she didn't usually keep in contact with her loved ones on a regular basis. She died wrapping gifts and they couldn't determine her cause of death. Wow. That is just getting crazier and crazier. 3 years. Wow. So, okay, let's get into some of your comments. This episode didn't require a poll, so I'm not going to put a poll out. But I haven't been reading your comments because I have been going through all this stuff with my face. By my face, I mean my tooth, which then radiates to my face. Update. After that ER visit, I was in pain for a couple days, but being on antibiotics or whatever, I am feeling better. I did find another dentist, so let's hope that this dentist is the right one. I loved my first visit. I love everything I went through. I love everything they're saying, except the amount that it's going to cost to fix everything. That I don't love. But other than that, I'm really hopeful for this dentist. So I did promise y'all that I was going to read your comments. I don't remember where I left off, but let's get into, I guess, when AI Jane took over. I will read that. That was the case of Alexander Grunke. And that was the case where they chased this guy across state lines. But like when you even went into his background, you found out that he was trying to rob a grave for a reason. If you haven't listened to that one, go back and listen to that. It was called Grave Obsession. Murder suspect chased across states. And the question I had was, do you think that the case of necrophilia should have even made it to the second court? Shouldn't the first court have dealt with this? Yes or no? So Christina Bobo said he should have definitely been in jail for abuse of a corpse, necrophilia, and grave robbing. WTF, which is literally the same thing I said. And in the poll question, which was the same poll question, 100% of y'all said, yes, it should have been dealt with at the first court. It shouldn't have even made it to the second court. In the next Tuesday True Crime, that was the case of the former officer who was accused of rape of the 14-year-old girl, and he evaded getting put on the sex offender registry. If you haven't checked out that crazy one, go back to that one. That was the case of Brian Beck, so you could look that one up. And I said, do you think the plea deal was done with the victim in mind or the man in mind? Rob Lynn says, without knowing if the victim or victim's family wanted to continue with the trial, which is a huge mental burden to the victim, it's hard to say. However, Beck clearly made out on this one. If I were the judge, I would have rejected the plea deal and at least made them come back with executed jail time. And I agreed with that. 100% agree with that, because this was a bunch of bullshit. And that was the same question for the poll. Do you think the plea deal was done with the victim in mind or the man? And 100% of y'all said it was done with the man in mind. Like I said, if you want to hear more about that episode, go back and look for the episode of Brian Beck. It was a True Crime Tuesday episode. I think that's all the episodes that, for True Crime Tuesday anyway, that I missed comments on. If I didn't go back far enough and I missed your comment, then I apologize. Moving forward, I will be reading your comments again. And I want to thank each and every one of you, seriously, for your patience during everything that's been going on with me. Y'all don't even understand how much it means to me, how much pain I was in. I was really trying to get your episodes out. I really didn't want to miss your episodes. I do want to thank y'all. And I do want to thank my lambs in Patreon also for being so patient with me. I am feeling pain-free now. I do have a treatment plan in place. So I'm actually feeling ready. I'm ready to get back into it. So let's get back to this lamb. Let's get back on our schedule. Let's do what we're doing. And that is all I have for you for this True Crime Tuesday. As you can see, the sun is shining brighter. The trees are greener. I don't even know. I just feel better. So I hope y'all are sharing this happiness with me. I hope you're having a wonderful day. And if you're not, I am so sorry. I wish I could give you a hug. I am here if you need to talk. You can definitely DM me. You can email me at noconductradio@gmail.com if you need to talk about anything that's going on in your day. If you just need a shoulder to lean on, somebody to talk to, an ear to listen, I am here for you. Other than that, I hope you're sharing in my happy moment. Here is an ear hug. Love y'all. Thank you. See you in the next episode. Bye.